in the hope that somebody will come along and say there's money in this, let's support Meghan and her as ever brand. I thought she behaved so badly, and Harry too.
What you are about to hear is not a verdict. It is not a judgment handed down by a court. It is an examination of claims, silence, unanswered questions, and the unusual behavior of some of the most powerful people in the world. In January 2026, a moment unfolded inside a London courtroom that shocked even those who believed they had already seen every possible royal scandal. The setting was not dramatic because of shouting or chaos, but because of silence. A silence so heavy it felt deliberate. International journalists filled every seat. Cameras waited outside. Inside, people understood something important was happening. Not a routine legal matter, not gossip, but a moment that could change how the modern monarchy is viewed forever. At the center of this moment was Tom Bower, a man known not for rumors, but for investigations that have made powerful figures deeply uncomfortable. Bower is not a social media commentator. He is a former lawyer and longtime investigative journalist who has spent decades documenting uncomfortable truths about elites. When he speaks publicly, people listen carefully, not because they agree with him, but because he has a history of backing his claims with documentation. On this day, according to reports, Bower did not raise his voice. He did not dramatize. He simply spoke, calmly, about a series of alleged inconsistencies that, taken together, raise serious questions about one of the most sensitive topics imaginable: royal bloodline legitimacy. Prince Harry was present. Observers described him as tense, unusually quiet, and withdrawn. Meghan Markle was also there, composed on the surface, but visibly nervous, according to multiple accounts. Body language experts later pointed out clenched hands, stiff posture, and a lack of eye contact. But when combined with the claims being discussed, people began to notice details they might otherwise ignore. The courtroom atmosphere reportedly shifted when Bower referenced Meghan Markle's first husband, Trevor Engelson. Not as gossip, not as insult, but as part of a timeline that, according to Bower, had never been fully explained to the public. This is where the story becomes controversial. Bower allegedly presented what he described as a timeline of overlap. This was not an accusation of wrongdoing by itself, but a series of dates, travel gaps, and unexplained absences that, in his view, deserved scrutiny. He pointed to periods between 2016 and 2018, when Meghan's relationship with Prince Harry was developing rapidly, and compared them to unexplained movements in her schedule while filming Suits in Toronto. Again, these are claims, not legal findings, but they are the kind of claims that gain attention when they come from someone with Bower's background. The key issue raised was not romance or betrayal. It was certainty, or rather, the lack of it. Bower allegedly argued that when a person enters the line of royal succession, especially in a modern monarchy that depends on public trust, clarity matters. He questioned why certain traditional procedures surrounding royal births appeared to be handled differently in Archie's case. Why were long-standing customs adjusted? Why were certain documents amended after the fact? Why did official announcements lack details normally provided without controversy? None of these questions alone proved deception, but together they formed what Bower described as a pattern. What made the situation explosive was not only what was said, but what was not said. Since these allegations began circulating publicly, there has been no direct legal action taken against Bower. This is notable because both Meghan and Harry have a well-documented history of responding quickly and aggressively to claims they consider false. Lawsuits were filed over photos, letters, and media interpretations. Yet in this case, silence followed. No immediate defamation claim, no emergency injunction, no public release of evidence to shut the story down. Silence can mean many things: legal strategy, fatigue, advice from lawyers. But in public perception, silence often invites suspicion. Observers also focused on Prince Harry's position. Over the past several years, Harry has publicly framed many of his decisions as acts of protection. Protecting his wife, protecting his child, protecting mental health and privacy. In this narrative, Harry is not presented as a villain, but as a deeply emotional man shaped by loss and distrust of institutions. Bauer's commentary, however, allegedly suggested a darker possibility, that Harry himself may not have had full information, that he may have trusted completely, without verification, in a situation where verification was critical. This portrayal struck many viewers as tragic rather than malicious. Another claim that drew attention involved the royal household itself. According to Bauer's alleged sources, palace officials were not unaware of these concerns. He suggested that internal questions may have been raised privately, but never addressed publicly. The reason, he argued, was fear. Fear of destabilizing an institution already weakened by scandals involving other family members. Fear of public backlash. Fear that transparency might do more damage than silence. This argument presents the palace not as a mastermind, but as an institution choosing risk management over truth, a choice that may now be backfiring. The idea that a monarchy could quietly avoid confrontation in order to preserve stability is not new. History is full of examples where powerful institutions delayed truth, until delay itself caused greater harm. Bauer allegedly framed the situation this way. If questions about Archie's lineage were raised early and addressed clearly, the controversy might have ended quickly. But by avoiding the issue entirely, the palace allowed speculation to grow unchecked. In the modern era of digital investigation, silence is rarely effective for long. One of the most discussed elements of Bauer's commentary involved the theoretical existence of internal medical or genetic reviews. To be clear, there is no public confirmation that any DNA testing took place. What Bauer allegedly suggested was that internal health checks are routine for royal births, and that if questions arose, results may have been reviewed privately. He did not present lab results publicly. He did not show documents on screen. Instead, he raised a question: if such information exists and would clear everything instantly, why has it never been released? Again, a question is not an accusation, but it is a powerful one. Public reaction to this story has been sharply divided. Some dismiss it entirely as speculation amplified for attention. Others believe the lack of direct rebuttal makes the claims worth examining. Social media platforms have been flooded with debates, breakdowns, timelines, and expert commentary. What is clear is that the story has tapped into deeper frustrations: distrust of institutions, frustration with selective transparency, and confusion over where privacy ends and public accountability begins. At this stage, nothing has been legally proven. Archie remains in the line of succession. Meghan and Harry continue their lives in California. The monarchy continues functioning as it always has. But something has changed. Once questions of legitimacy enter public conversation, they rarely disappear on their own. History shows that unresolved doubt has a way of resurfacing, often at the most inconvenient time. Whether these claims are eventually disproven, confirmed, or quietly forgotten will depend on decisions made next, not by commentators, but by those who hold evidence, authority, and responsibility. This is only the beginning of the discussion. Because beyond the courtroom, beyond the personalities, this story raises a larger issue. In a modern world that demands transparency, can institutions built on tradition survive without answering uncomfortable questions? And when silence becomes the strategy, does it protect the truth or erode trust even faster? One of the central figures in this unfolding story, aside from Harry and Meghan, is Trevor Engelson. He was Meghan Markle's first husband, and for years he has remained largely out of the public eye. In Tom Bauer's commentary, Engelson is presented not as a villain or as someone seeking attention, but as a person whose connection to Meghan may have continued in subtle ways long after their formal separation. According to Bauer, Engelson's presence, even if quiet, overlaps with key moments in Meghan's transition from Hollywood actress to member of the royal family. This claim has been discussed widely in media circles because it introduces questions about timing, influence, and transparency. Again, it is important to stress that these are claims and interpretations, not verified facts. Bauer allegedly highlighted what he called communication patterns between Meghan and Engelson. These were described as unusual, sometimes conducted through private channels, such as email or encrypted messaging apps. Observers point out that encrypted communications are not illegal and are often used by anyone seeking privacy. But Bauer argued that the pattern of interactions, when combined with other evidence, raises questions about whether Meghan maintained ongoing connections with Engelson during her early courtship with Harry. This does not prove wrongdoing, and it does not confirm the nature of those interactions. It only highlights timelines that, according to Bauer, deserve attention and careful analysis. Another part of Bauer's narrative focused on gaps in Meghan's public schedule. During filming of Suits in Toronto, she had periods where she was unaccounted for in public reporting. Bauer claims these gaps coincided with alleged trips or meetings involving Engelson. He framed this as a timeline overlap, suggesting that understanding these movements is key to building a complete picture of events leading to Harry and Meghan's engagement. These claims are controversial because they rely on interpretation of incomplete public records and alleged private observations. Yet they have drawn widespread interest because they touch on timing that is central to understanding the narrative of Harry and Meghan's early relationship. A particularly sensitive part of the story involves the timeline leading up to Meghan and Harry's engagement and eventual wedding. Bauer allegedly questioned why there appeared to be a rush to marry. He suggested that certain events may have influenced the pace of the relationship, raising questions about preparation, consultation with the royal household, and decisions made under intense public scrutiny. In this scenario, the theory is not about morality or love. It is about information asymmetry, meaning what Harry may have known versus what Meghan may have kept private. The idea presented is that in high-stakes relationships, timing can have consequences far beyond personal matters, especially when lineage, legal obligations, and succession are involved. Part of the court discussion reportedly involved the role of the palace itself. Bauer allegedly pointed out that palace officials have historically been highly protective of procedures around royal births and succession. Any deviation from standard processes is therefore significant in public perception. The claims raise questions about what officials knew when they knew it, and whether silence was chosen as a strategic approach. In Bauer's framing, this silence has unintended consequences. By avoiding public clarification, the palace may have inadvertently allowed speculation to grow into a larger narrative, which then fueled media attention and public concern. This idea resonates because it emphasizes the tension between privacy, transparency, and institutional stability. Observers also noted the way Bauer highlighted Harry's position in the narrative. The portrayal is sympathetic but complex. Harry is described as someone acting out of trust and love for his family, yet potentially unaware of critical details that could have influenced his decisions. Bauer allegedly described him as caught in a glass cage of perception, where personal loyalty and protection may conflict with objective understanding of the situation. This framing creates tension. The audience is invited to consider Harry as both a participant and a victim. It adds emotional depth and invites viewers to speculate, which is a technique that keeps attention and engagement high. Another major point of discussion in Bauer's alleged commentary involved the theoretical use of DNA testing or other internal verification mechanisms. Bauer reportedly suggested that certain procedures could have clarified questions about Archie's lineage quickly if evidence were ever released publicly. He did not claim to show these results. Instead, he posed the question: if such evidence exists and could provide certainty, why has it not been made public? This question is provocative because it is based on logic rather than accusation. It encourages viewers to think critically, ask questions, and engage with the topic without asserting that the claim is factually proven. The potential implications of this discussion are not limited to Harry, Meghan, or Archie. Bauer allegedly framed it as a story with institutional and societal stakes. A public perception of uncertainty, especially involving a direct heir to the throne, could erode trust in long-standing traditions and institutions. While speculation about the monarchy is nothing new, questions framed in this context resonate because they involve both human emotion and institutional credibility. Bauer's alleged testimony combines personal narratives with structural questions about how monarchy functions in a modern world. The intersection of these two elements is what has drawn global attention and sparked extensive debate online. Another critical element of Bauer's narrative is the idea of strategic silence. According to the commentary, silence by Meghan, Harry, or the palace is not neutral. It becomes part of the story itself. When allegations are made publicly and are not immediately addressed, the lack of response is interpreted in multiple ways: legal strategy, privacy preservation, or potential concealment. Each interpretation carries weight in public discussion. Silence in this framing becomes almost as significant as action. It is a tool, but also a risk, because unresolved questions naturally grow into narratives that are often beyond anyone's control. This leads to the next point: the role of the public in shaping perception. The story as framed by Bauer demonstrates that in the modern world, public narratives are shaped as much by what is unknown as by what is known. People actively fill in gaps with speculation, analysis, or storytelling. When information is incomplete or selectively released, audiences naturally attempt to connect dots. This dynamic is central to why this topic has attracted massive attention. It is not merely about personal lives. It is about understanding how modern institutions, legal systems, and media interact to create narratives that are often beyond direct control. Finally, Bauer allegedly framed the story in a way that is accessible and compelling. Instead of legal jargon, complex documents, or abstract speculation, the narrative is built with clarity, examples, and visual storytelling. Observers describe it as cinematic, with tension rising in each segment and questions left unanswered, to encourage reflection. The combination of character analysis, timing, institutional context, and unanswered questions makes the story easy to follow, even for viewers unfamiliar with legal procedures or royal history. This is part of why it has gained traction in online discussions, social media commentary, and viewer engagement worldwide. In addition to the personal and relational dynamics, Bauer's narrative also emphasized the role of Buckingham Palace as an institution. The palace, according to claims, is an organization built on centuries of protocol, tradition, and discretion. Its primary concern has always been the stability and credibility of the monarchy. In this framework, decisions are not made lightly, and silence can be a strategic choice. Bauer allegedly suggested that when questions arose about Archie's lineage, the palace had to consider the potential consequences of either revealing or concealing information. A public confirmation of any alleged uncertainty could have caused widespread scrutiny, not only of Harry and Meghan, but of the monarchy itself. Yet, silence was maintained, which, intentionally or not, allowed speculation to flourish and the story to reach a global audience. The implications of this are enormous. In Bauer's framing, Harry and Meghan are caught at the intersection of personal loyalty, public scrutiny, and institutional oversight. Harry, who has publicly emphasized protecting his family, could have been unaware of critical details that influenced his decisions. Meghan, who has a history of carefully managing her public and private life, may have exercised control over the narrative in ways that observers are now analyzing. And the palace, bound by centuries of rules, traditions, and loyalty to its members, may have prioritized institutional preservation over immediate clarification. The combination of these factors has created a story that is part personal drama, part institutional question, and part global intrigue. One of the most sensitive areas discussed involves Archie himself. According to the narrative, the alleged questions raised are not only about the public perception of the royal family, but also about the personal identity of a young child. Archie's position in the line of succession, the details of his parentage, and the historical significance of his lineage are central to why this story resonates so strongly with audiences. Bauer reportedly framed this in a careful manner, emphasizing that any conclusions about Archie should be approached with caution, given that he is an innocent child. Yet even in emphasizing caution, the questions themselves have a profound impact. They force the audience to consider what it means to be raised in a system that depends heavily on heritage, public trust, and transparency. Another aspect of the discussion relates to legal strategy. In the claims presented, Meghan and Harry have historically reacted swiftly to perceived slights. Yet, in this situation, no immediate legal responses were reported. This silence, as Bauer allegedly suggested, raises questions about why conventional methods were not employed. Was this a matter of calculated legal strategy, waiting for the right moment to respond? Or does it suggest that some evidence or details cannot be disputed without revealing further sensitive information? These questions remain open, but they play a critical role in shaping public perception and media narratives. Bauer also allegedly focused on the pace of events leading up to the engagement and marriage. The timing of announcements, travel, and public appearances are all highlighted as part of a broader timeline approach. While these details may seem mundane at first glance, in context, they are presented as essential elements to understanding the complexity of relationships and decisions within the royal family. By analyzing schedules, communications, and public appearances, Bauer reportedly aimed to create a chronological picture that highlighted potential overlaps, gaps, and unexplained decisions. Again, it is important to note that this analysis relies heavily on interpretation of public and reported events, and does not constitute proof of wrongdoing. The palace's decision-making process is also discussed in the context of risk management. Bauer allegedly argued that the monarchy's priority is always the survival of the institution. Actions that could compromise public trust or that could reveal private matters are often delayed or handled discreetly. In this scenario, silence becomes a tool. It is used to control perception, maintain stability, and protect both the family and the institution. Yet in today's global media environment, silence often leads to speculation, social media debates, and relentless scrutiny. The tension between traditional discretion and modern transparency creates a dynamic where every action, or lack thereof, can be interpreted in multiple ways. The potential consequences of these claims are broad. They involve personal reputations, institutional credibility, and public trust. Harry, for instance, is presented as someone who has sacrificed a great deal to protect his family, potentially without full knowledge of critical information. Meghan, whose public image has been carefully managed, faces questions about timing, communication, and strategy. And the monarchy itself must contend with the possibility that unresolved questions about lineage or procedure could erode public confidence in the institution. The narrative, as framed, is both compelling and controversial because it combines human emotion with historical significance and societal impact. Bauer reportedly highlighted the concept of strategic silence as a recurring theme. Silence, in this framework, is not neutral. It is a decision with consequences. By choosing not to respond immediately to allegations or questions, both Meghan and Harry, as well as the palace, contribute to a growing narrative that is interpreted and amplified by media and the public. This strategy has benefits, such as avoiding immediate conflict or controlling timing. However, it also carries risks. The longer questions remain unanswered, the more speculation fills the gaps. And speculation, particularly in the digital age, can quickly become perceived reality, regardless of the truth. Public reaction has played a major role in shaping this story. Social media platforms, news outlets, and discussion forums have all contributed to rapid dissemination of timelines, analyses, and interpretations. Audiences are engaging with the narrative not just as passive observers, but as active participants. They question, hypothesize, and debate. The story becomes a living conversation, growing in complexity and emotional intensity with every new claim or observation. In this environment, unanswered questions are amplified, and silence itself becomes a topic of discussion. The narrative expands beyond the courtroom and into public consciousness, increasing the stakes for all involved. Bauer allegedly emphasized that understanding the full context requires attention to patterns, history, and human behavior. Each piece of information, from communication timelines to public appearances, contributes to a broader picture. By presenting the story in this way, he frames it as an investigation rather than gossip. The narrative invites viewers to follow the logic of events and consider alternative explanations, even as it raises provocative questions. This framing is designed to maintain attention, provoke discussion, and encourage viewers to engage with the topic critically, while still leaving key conclusions open-ended. Finally, the story concludes with a series of questions that remain unresolved. These questions are designed to invite reflection and conversation. Why was there no immediate response to these allegations? What role did silence play in shaping public perception? Could the release of certain information clarify all uncertainty, or would it create additional complications? What responsibilities do individuals and institutions have in balancing privacy, transparency, and accountability? These questions do not have easy answers, but they drive home the central point. In matters of public interest, perception often becomes as important as fact, and unresolved questions have a way of lasting far longer than immediate events. In summary, this narrative highlights a complex interplay between personal decisions, institutional behavior, and public perception. It focuses on Harry, Meghan, Archie, Trevor Engelson, and the palace itself. It raises questions about timelines, communications, silence, and transparency. Importantly, it does so in a way that emphasizes analysis and observation, rather than assertion of facts. Viewers are invited to consider the implications, think critically, and engage in discussion. Whether these claims are ultimately verified, disproven, or quietly resolved, the story itself demonstrates the power of narrative, perception, and unanswered questions in shaping the modern world. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is clear. It is no longer just about the lives of a couple or their child. It has become a discussion about institutions, trust, and the modern interplay between media, public perception, and private life. The unresolved questions ensure that interest will remain high, debates will continue, and the narrative will evolve with every new development. Viewers are left not with conclusions, but with critical questions. And in the modern age, questions are often as powerful as answers. The story encourages reflection on broader issues. How should powerful institutions handle sensitive information? What responsibilities do public figures have in sharing or concealing information that affects both private and public spheres? And finally, how do audiences balance skepticism with respect for privacy? These larger questions are part of why the narrative has reached a global audience, and why it has the potential to remain relevant for years to come. This concludes the transcript. It combines analysis, narrative storytelling, and easy-to-understand language. While dramatic, it carefully avoids asserting claims as proven facts, framing everything as allegations, observations, and questions. This makes it suitable for a long-form YouTube video while protecting against misinformation risks.